Y'all know what it is.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Josh Simons, the CEO and co-founder of Vampr, the world's largest and most active social and professional network for musicians. Recognized by Fast Company as one of the most innovative companies in 2022, Vampr is home to more than 1 million users and is active in every country on the planet. In fact, the music startup has helped fledgling musicians broker more than 7 million connections worldwide since its inception. Prior to running Vampr, Josh spent the better part of a decade as a musician himself, a successful artist, songwriter, and producer in his own right. However, after changing his focus from performing live to performing tech miracles, Josh and his team at Vampr have built an app that is now a multi-award-winning platform, including receiving a most prestigious nod from Apple with an inclusion in their Best of the Year list. Joining us today for an exciting conversation about building a social media platform specifically for musicians, building an award-winning social media network, and securing more than $3 million in funding, overcoming the obstacles in the modern music landscape, and so much more. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Josh Simons. Hey, Josh, how are you, man?
The podcast is finished. I can go home.
Well, it's we always go the extra mile to try and make it really easy on our guests when they show up. We try and keep these things short and tight,
I love it. It's great. I'm good. How are you guys?
Very good. Thanks so much. And we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is a conversation I think we're all going to enjoy quite a bit. We, both Mike and I have a lot of experience in the music industry as well. And, have been in and around it for a long time. So we always love these conversations. They end up being kind of industry centric, but fun.
Cool.
Yeah. So you got your start as a musician. Is that correct?
Well, actually, my first sort of taste of the music industry was as a manager. I sort of straight out of school had a few friends or friends of friends that were in bands that were sort of playing the live scene. Melbourne's I grew up in Melbourne, I should say, and it's a big music city. It's probably one of the bigger ones in the world. I think in terms of number of gigs per night per capita, it's the largest in the world. So there's a lot of, I, got introduced to some bands. I saw the commercial potential and just got excited about what we could do. None of the bands had any interest in being commercial. And so I decided to stop managing, and I was like, I'm just going to make that music myself. And so then I started a band called Buchanan, which was big in Australia and exactly nowhere else. But we had a very lucky start, I guess, in that, within 6 months of starting the thing, we were on the radio, and I think 6 months after that, we were playing festivals. And so it was very much like a baptism by fire into the music industry. And that artist project kept me going for about 5 years before I started thinking about Vampr and tech.
Yeah, nice. No, it's such an interesting thing. Just given over the last 10 or 15 years, the amount of technology that's been infused into the music business, right? I think a lot of people who are musicians see themselves more as, artists or people like that. And tech maybe isn't the number one thing on their mind, but certainly in the last, so many years, maybe even as far back as like MySpace for musicians, technology has played a major role, and maybe
I'd go back even further than that and say that technology and music have been forever linked. If you think about how music is consumed, whether it's the gramophone to vinyl, yep, to tape, to CD, etc. Technology is kind of the vehicle of consumption. And so the two have always been interlinked. It's just it's more prominent these days, I think, and especially artists have to play a more active role in embracing technology to promote their careers. But technology and music, as much as they might be interlinked, have a very strange relationship too, because technology has negatively affected the industry through its trough years. It's been piracy, for example. It took over a decade for the revenues to recover to where they were, and so it's a strange relationship between the two things.
Yeah, you heard my dog bark. His name is Moog. Oh, yeah. After the synthesizer. So right there with the technological side of the music part. Yeah. So like Spotify, that's a great example of what technology has done to actually detriment the industry and kind of hurt it more than help it. Where do you how did you get your foot in the door to start a social network specifically for musicians? Was it the management side of things that kind of just, let's create this solution to help book more gigs. Was that like the driving factor behind it, or was it more just you saw a need and went down that road?
No, yeah. So I was, as I said, I had a good run in Australia, and then I tried to go back to my hometown of London and recreate the success there, and it just didn't happen. And the main reason it didn't happen was I didn't really have a team. I didn't have like a manager. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a radio plugger, and I didn't even know where to find them, even if I could get them. And it sort of started me on this process of speaking to artists from, people who play stadiums right down to people who are just getting started and asking them what was the biggest pain point at the start of your career. And the answer that everyone sort of gave is the same, which is that, until they found someone who actually opened one door and maybe helped elevate them and get to the next level, things stayed pretty stagnant for quite a long amount of time, in many cases 5 to 10 years, even the most talented musicians I know. And so I thought, well, how can we use technology to take 5 years and condense that down into 5 minutes or 5 hours? And I sort of looked around at what was on offer, and there was great websites like TuneCore at the time that helped you get your music onto Spotify, or, even you could, CD Baby, who would do physical prints and stuff. There was MySpace as well that was good for sort of some degree of networking, although it was dying at the time that I started thinking about Vampr. And there were some publishing tools and stuff as well, and sites that helped you build fan bases, but there wasn't any site or service that was specifically dedicated towards helping you build a professional network, which really is the business of connecting people with other people who can solve their problems. So it's kind of an unsexy problem. It's not as fun as Spotify, which is home to every song in the world. It's much more, banal than that in many respects. We're just trying to connect the future Johns and Pauls, but someone needed to do it. And I'd sort of had an idea about how I would do that. And here we are.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a nice segue to talk a little bit more about the platform itself and really what it does for artists. I've seen it equated to sort of like LinkedIn for musicians, which is, for anybody who doesn't happen to use LinkedIn at this point, it's basically just, professional networking versus like, maybe being on Twitter or something like that, where you're engaging socially. And so, but would you mind talking about how this, how the app evolved and what it sort of does for artists at this point?
Yeah. So when it started, like when we started it and when we first released it, it was really just about connecting the members of the band. So you could go onto Vampr as a bass player and search for a drummer in your area. And I think we had all the members of the band plus a manager, and maybe we had songwriters and producers, but there weren't many categories. Today, it's grown a lot, and there's about 27,000 categories on there from, you got mastering engineers, videographers, people who will finance your career, lawyers, music teachers. So it's pretty much anything you can conceive of in the music ecosystem or any job related to it. You'll probably be able to find someone on the app who can help you in that respect. And so like a LinkedIn or any meet platform where you're meeting people rather than chatting with friends, you search for something, you put in your search preferences, your filters, whatever, and you'll get a series of results back. And if you see someone who meets those needs, you can send them a connection request and a note. And, if they accept that, you can start a conversation.
Nice.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. And I mean, I've seen, similar apps for other industries where people, are, I guess, niching down into their specific expertise and trying to give people the tools they need for that. Yeah. And in fact, Mike has even thought of projects similar to that. Mike's more in the DJ realm, but his, same sort of idea, but there's a lot of needs that are specific to DJs versus, a professional networker on LinkedIn, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so when you looked at when I first started thinking about this, and of course I looked at LinkedIn and some of the other versions or similar sort of style applications out there that tried to solve this problem, LinkedIn wasn't useful because it's resume based, it's scroll based, it's click based, it's a lot of word information, but of course music is tribal, and the language of music isn't necessarily even English. But so we needed to create a platform that was instant, audio visual. It gave you the ability to audition people without having to necessarily reach out to them first. And so things like Craigslist, for example, because I remember we used Craigslist to find a drummer at one point in my band's history, and you don't get to audition them first. So you waste a lot of time actually having them come to your studio, play for an hour, work out, do I actually like this guy? Does he really fit my vibe? What if you can do that instantly? And so that's sort of where this all started, was like, let's make it bespoke for the needs of a creative. But, those needs do extend to other creative fields too. It's not strictly relegated to music. And so that does give us the ability to expand the network gradually over time. The other problem with some of the other apps out there that were trying to tackle this problem at the time is a lot of them are like map-based, which is ridiculous. Like a map-based solution is great if you've got 1,000 users, and most apps only start with, tens or hundreds of people, so it makes sense. But as soon as you get, like in Vampr's case, I think we've got nearly 1.5 million people now. Maps, you can't, you have to zoom in and it gets cluttered very quickly and it's just not scalable, right? And so it was very obvious to me looking at the landscape that these companies trying to solve the problem hadn't given it the due thought and research that it required to really come up with a solution that could grow in the way that we want it to.
Yeah. I remember, Guitar Center, you go there and you look on the bulletin board to find your bass player, your drummer. And so you really are solving a need for bands that, if they need a new drummer, they need a new bass player, they need this or that. It's nice that you have the ability to actually audition the person beforehand. Is it like more like they post a couple clips of a riff they're doing, or is it more like, hey, I need this, and then you have the ability to send a demo over?
It can be both. It can be either. Typically, folks, like the profiles that perform best on Vampr and they get the most work and the most connection requests and the most love are people who take the time to upload, clips, videos, anything related to their profession. So obviously, like a graphic designer is not going to put up a video clip, but they might link their portfolio, or like you can embed your Instagram account, for example. But, a drummer, there's a lot of clips like on drummer profiles of people just holding down a groove for a minute. And like, that's the perfect audition piece because someone's going to immediately go, they fit the look. They like the same songs that I listen to because everyone has to display their favorite artists. And he or she can hold down a groove. And so that would be like the perfect audition. But, some people don't have complete profiles, but they might post a cute picture. So they might be hit up and someone says, I like your look. Have you got any music? And then they might exchange tracks that way. So it does happen in both ways. So
I think I tried to look for a website for it, and it's actually a phone-based app, right? You have to have it on your phone.
Well, okay. We've actually just launched the start of the web version, but it's like it's a work in progress. We're a mobile first company. It's a mobile first platform. We're planning to transition away from that this year, but yes, it's easier to find it on the App Store. So
I would have done it if I had started prepping a little sooner. So I apologize for that. But I'm actually curious about the process of why did you start with a phone-based solution over having a website first? Is there any reason you went that route versus, yeah.
I mean, the truth is, and it's not like the sexiest answer in the world, but at the time when we would talk, me and my partner Barry were talking about launching the company, or we had this idea, it was just the buzz in tech at the time was mobile first. Everyone was talking about it. It was sort of the companies that were mobile first were getting more funding. And also this idea of, when you're in the studio and you have a need, or when you're on the road and you have a need, you're not necessarily at your computer. So there was a little bit of consideration of both, but it wasn't like some profound realization we had. It was just sort of where we started.
Can I actually ask you about the actual starting process of getting the app built, how you hired your developer, if you did it yourself or know someone that did that? And then let's talk about like the first, month of launch and how things went.
Yeah. So the launch, like from registering the company name to actually getting the product out into the market, was a 1-year process. First 3 months were me finding the development team. So I've got a pretty mechanical minded brain. I'm a basic web coder, but I'm not an app coder at all. But I had enough of an idea of what the infrastructure we needed was for me to ask the right questions. And I always feel in life like getting any business off the ground is not so much knowing what to do, but knowing which questions to ask, and that leads you down a path. So I had sort of a step uncle or something, some semi-related family member that worked at a university and taught the data science kids everything they learn. And so I went to him and said, have you got any ex-students who might be right for the role? And he introduced me to quite a few people. Not all of them ended up working on that team, but some of them did. And they introduced us to other folks and so on and so forth. And suddenly we had a team of like 8. It didn't take too long to assemble that. Took us probably 9 months from there to actually build the first sort of MVP, and we just launched on iOS initially, so it wasn't on Android. And yeah, the first the first several months, really the first 6 months was rough. Like we'd get over the moon when 100 people were using the app in any given day, and when that would happen, the app would crash. Whereas now we're onboarding 100 people every hour. So it's like
that's amazing.
Yeah, but getting the first 1,000 or even the first 10,000 users was by far the hardest part of the whole process. The problem with building a social network, as I'm sure anyone who's ever used one would understand, is that no one's going to turn up to no one wants to turn up to an empty party. So you've got this chicken and egg thing where you're trying to onboard people and get them to stay, but why would they stay when there's no one else? Or unless you don't have any constantly new features that you're shipping that gives them a reason to come back. And so you've got this real problem right at the top, and there's really no way to solve that other than manually hitting people up. Like we would go to music schools, we put up posters around, like we started in LA, so we put up signs all around LA. We went on Craigslist, and every team member had to hit up at least 50 people a day in various cities and email them and say, check out this app, I think we might be able to help solve your problem. It was really slow, and then it took quite a long time to really get to like that first, as I say, about 10,000. And then something happened around that time when we started to, the product got sturdier. Number one, we could support more people, so it was able to be scaled a little more. And we felt at that time that it was probably less risky to spend money on advertising. And so we started advertising. And as soon as we started doing that, things just exploded.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And I like getting that little bit of background. Before building this app, did you have any other like tech experience or app development experience, or was it all just, this was your first go?
Well, it's funny because I get asked that question a lot, obviously. And the answer is like technically no. But then I was thinking about this the other day. I actually did run a very, very big website when I was a young teenager, and I always forget that I did that. But I ran the official 24 fan site when I was like 13 for Fox, and I was in Australia back then, but they didn't know my age or anything. It's a pretty ugly like Web 1 website. It's still online somewhere, but so I guess I ran that for a long time and had some, as I say, some HTML experience, but no experience building like graph databases. And you should see our diagram of our schematics of how the tech works. It's pretty complex stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to get into a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, I just think it's something that might be of value to other entrepreneurs or people listening in on this who maybe have an app idea or something they want to push forward, is when to and why to work with venture capital. One of the statistics we cited in the intro there was that you guys have drawn at least $3 million in venture or angel capital. And I wondered if you couldn't talk a little bit about just sort of the decisions that went into, deciding to go that route, so like when was it that you knew you needed money and why did you choose the VC route, that sort of thing?
Well, you always need money when you're building a business that you have expectations to scale in the way that we certainly did, where we knew that the addressable or attainable market was in the hundreds of millions of people. So you can't do that without money. So really, we started fundraising before we even had a product. Like we were fundraising within a week of registering the company name. I was fortunate that my business partner, just going back a step, he signed me to my first record deal. He's about 30 years older than me. But then after, I finished up the music stuff, I went back to him and said, do you want to be partners on this tech thing? He'd already done 3 other startups. So he had some experience in raising, although actually, I think I've done most of the raising, but he understood the process of starting a company, and he saved us. I always say the best thing he brought to the table was he probably saved us like 5 years in learning and making mistakes that he'd made in the past, right? So, he installed a sort of work ethic in me that you've got to always be raising. And so we're constantly in the middle of some sort of round, whether it's a bridging round or a formal series round. But yes, we started looking for money straight away, but a lot of companies, and this is probably advice for anyone who's got an idea, will start with what's called like an FFF round, which is friends, families, fools. We did one of those. I think we raised $270,000, which lasted us the whole first year, which is funny because that lasts us 2 months now. And that was enough to get an MVP built. And a pretty good quality MVP, like, the code wasn't rubbish. But, it's not necessary. I've got friends who I have a small stake in their company, but they basically taught themselves how to code from watching YouTube videos. They're now making tens of millions of dollars a year. And they did it pretty much all on their own. And then, that caught the attention of Y Combinator, who invited them in, and that then set them on a pathway for success, and power to them. So you don't need the point I'm making is you definitely don't need money. The other thing that I kind of wish we did do in hindsight was have a technical co-founder, because even though we've got a fantastic CTO, and I think our tech team's as good as any on the planet, during the tougher months, and every single startup will have tough months. They call it the trough, where you sort of run out of money and you don't know if you have to shut down or lay people off or what have you, or a combination of the two. When we went through those tough months, it's always like, it would have been a lot easier to get through those months had we had a technical founder that could have sort of carried on some of the product momentum through those tricky periods. But, we soldiered on through. We did a couple of crowdfunding rounds as well, that's been very powerful for us. We've got 3,000 user investors now, but you can't start there. So a lot of other people who do have ideas come to me, especially because of the crowdfunding thing, and say, hey, your crowdfunding rounds did quite good. I think we've raised $2.1 million from crowdfunding in the US. How do I do the same thing? It's like, well, you don't start there. Like, we did a smaller crowdfunding round and we had a smaller user base, but we also were lucky that we had a user base of, I think it was 900,000 or 600,000 people, at the time. And everything in tech is funnels, right? So if you've got a user base of 600,000 people, if you want to do a crowdfunding round, first you've got to get the 600,000 people. That's not cheap. Then you send the email blast and maybe only 60,000 people receive it, and then only 6,000 people open it, and then maybe only 600 people go to the page, and then of that 60 people invest. And so that's how a funnel works. And so it's not like raising money is expensive, basically, is what I'm saying, no matter which way you do it, whether you're doing it crowdfunding, whether you go to VCs who might give you less favorable terms. There's always a cost. And there's also a time factor too, to building up audiences. So yeah, it's complicated. Raising money is kind of hard.
I think that's really useful, right? I think one of the things that people get when they do a lot of their research on YouTube and, maybe even listen to shows like this sometimes, is that it feels like the track is pretty linear, right? Like there's a plan. Like all you have to do is step A, B, C, and D, and you've got success. So I really appreciate you sort of pointing out that, there's other ways of doing it too.
There is a track if you're prepared to put in the effort, but the thing is, most people don't want to put the effort in. Like if you are prepared to learn how to code, if you are prepared to bootstrap, if you are prepared to really think long and hard and maybe years as to what problem it is that is actually worth solving and do the market research, then yes, there is a track. Like the story of my friend's company that are now printing money. But they put in like almost a decade of due diligence and effort and, preparation. And so that's the cost. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, who look at tech think about get rich quick. And there's nothing quick or rich about what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what can I ask, what is the product? How does it make money? I see social network, and I see the only way to generate income with it is through like advertising, or do you have like a subscription tier where you can connect with direct people if you pay X amount of dollars? What feature sets do you guys offer that actually generates income?
Yeah, so great question. We only just introduced ads very recently, but we'll get back to that. We've for over a year, we've had a product called Vampr Pro, which is a premium version of it. Like you said, more connection requests, more content on your profile, sort of really helps you stand out, gives you a bit of an advantage in the algorithm as well, more opportunities, etc. So there's Vampr Pro, and that's quite cheap. It's $4.99 a month. There's tens of thousands of people on the Pro tier. It's a good service. We've just launched something called Vampr Academy, which is our educational suite. That's on the website, and that's where you can get a real masterclass and basically a condensed 2-year university course in music business in, you can consume it on a weekend if you really wanted to, but most people consume it over, spread out of time. But certainly condenses a 2-year degree into a very short course. So that's just launched, and that's sort of, I think there's a discount right now. It's $19, but for a month, it's a subscription also. But I think the actual pricing will be $23 a month. And then ads is new for us. Obviously, of everyone who uses Vampr, not everyone subscribes to either of those things. I think about 3% of users sign up, subscribe. So the 97%, we've just started rolling ads to. The difference with our ads program, I suppose, and most other websites or apps for that matter is we don't just plug in like AdMob or Google Ads or anything like that. We build our own ads manager from scratch. It took a very long time to do it. And we have a salesperson that goes out, speaks to music brands, basically courts advertisers' attention, sells our business and our numbers to them. They love it. They give us their assets. We run the ads, but we control it. The reason why I'm stressing this and I'm bringing it up is I think there's a huge shift away. Like people's trust in social networks is waning in general. They know that they're actually paying to be on there, just not with money, with their data. So by us controlling it and slightly changing the equation, it's a subtle shift, but an important one. We're not allowing advertisers to touch user data. We're not feeding back any email addresses or anything like that. We're taking what they want to target, we're presenting it to their target audience, and then we're just reporting them back the total number of impressions and clicks and charging for that. So we're taking back, I think, some responsibility on the part of the users, and hopefully our users appreciate us for that. But again, it's quite emblematic of how I sort of think about everything in Vampr through the lens of what would I have wanted when I was the artist. So I put myself in the shoes of the user every single day when I make decisions like that.
I love that. That is huge. Like just like the shoe ad when you're looking for guitars, that makes zero sense. And it probably helps with your marketing efforts as well. Because if you go to Sweetwater, you have a pool of 1 million different musicians. That's a sure, why not? Go right to the source. So
it's very easy to make the case to sell microphones to singers.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I love that too. And I do like the distinction, and I hope it's obvious to the people who use the platform, because that is a key thing, not only on the privacy front, but on the ability to sort of, I guess, choose advertisers in the best interest of your people instead of just whoever paid Google whatever dollars. Exactly. So I think that's great. One of the things that I wanted to try and talk about a little bit too is another statistic we brought up at the jump, which was this idea that you've facilitated more than 7 million connections across your platform. But I wanted to dig in a little bit about what those connections actually mean to the artist. And the reason I want to bring it up is one of the things that I've noticed that you guys do, at least according to the website, is some degree of publishing, which is, I guess, getting music on TV soundtracks and movies and things like that. And for a lot of artists, I mean, outside of maybe live performing, this is one of the few ways to make a lot of money.
Yes.
And so I wonder if you talk about what exactly a connection constitutes, and then sort of, what different types of connections might actually, be borne out through this app.
Yeah. So if you go to the bottom of our website, you'll see there's a few stats that we publicly update and that speaks directly to our server. Just reporting like the activity on the app, like the number of people who are swiping on profiles, making connections. So a connection is when one person has sort of swiped right on someone and said, I want to connect with them, send them a note, send them a connection request. And the other person has said, accept. And then they start a conversation. So that's a professional connection as per our definition. So that's what that number represents. And as I said at the top, that could be anything from agents speaking to bands, from guitarists speaking to drummers. It's just all and sundry that happens on our platform is counted in there. The publishing thing's a little bit different, but I'm happy to dive straight into that. So yeah, we do offer sync representation services. So sync obviously is the process of placing a song against a moving picture. So in most cases, a movie, a TV show, video game, advertisement. We launched something called Vampr Publishing about 18 months ago, which is a non-exclusive sync rep opt-in service where the onus is on Vampr to find a placement for your track. Once we find a placement for a track, it then becomes an exclusive relationship for 2 years with a 65-35 split in favor of the artist. Unlike every other service out there that does similar things, and there's not many, like there's SongTrader and there's some sync licensing companies that do it, like boutique agencies, but there's not really too many online services that do this. The problem with the ones that do it is they usually ask for exclusivity and they usually ask for an upfront payment. One of the reasons I never did those when I was an artist, and sync was my biggest earner. I earned more money on sync than I did in live performance. One of the reasons I didn't do those services, though, is I didn't want to pay some full upfront when they hadn't proven themselves yet. And I wasn't comfortable with giving away 50% of the royalty. And I wasn't comfortable with exclusivity. So we designed Vampr Publishing again as like, what would I have wanted? What would Josh want is a bit of a company match. But I'm right about this because, again, I was the artist and I know where the income comes from, and I know how to scrape through on a living just barely as an artist, which is kind of like the perfect sweet spot to be the founder of a network like this, right? Because if I had been an artist that had made $100 million, I would be pretty useless at this company, I would imagine, because I'd be out of touch with the artist's needs. But I was an artist who was sort of just getting to the point where I could, earn an annual income from music. And that's kind of, that's the sweet spot in many respects, because we want more artists to get to that point, but we also know the struggle of getting to that point. And so, yeah, Vampr Publishing was sort of built through that mindset.
So publishing is its own thing. Do you do like connecting with venues? Do you rent vans to bands? Do you lease equipment? Like there's so many different avenues that you could actually go down that, I'm sure they're in the works if they're not already.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's funny you asked that question because we were just talking about this like in a team meeting yesterday. But yeah, venues has been an option in the app for like probably 5 years. The problem is no one knows it's there. And when you do have an app that's like, when you spend some time on Vampr, you'll realize that this is actually quite a big beast. Like there's a lot of moving parts here. It's quite complicated. Hopefully not for the user experience, but it is like there's just a lot of stuff going on. What happens when you get, what some people call bloat in a product is features do go missing. And so, yeah, like venues being able to find performers being able to hit up venue promoters, that's been in there for a long time, but it's not widely used. The question we always sort of ask ourselves, and also I'll get your opinion on this in a second, but, do you advertise those specific use cases? Because as I said, there's 27,000 categories on the app. We can't produce 27,000 different ads talking, or it'd be twice the number, promoting every possible which way that Vampr could be used. And so our challenge is always which use case is the largest, and how do we get that message out there? But like, what do you think? Should we be targeting niches within niches? That's really what we're talking about here.
That I see where your dilemma is there, because there's so many different avenues, and so like just adding a feature set to the site can be very complicated. And so what do you focus on? If it were me, I would hit up your actual base and do like questionnaires, like what do you guys want next? And I'm sure that's what you would do. But as someone in the industry, you knew what needed to be addressed first, and then you made those steps, and now it's kind of like, now what? Like I would see how it'd be difficult to have like a venue profile and allow booking to go back and forth between the artists. And then, like, I don't know, there's just so many, like the sky's the limit on the options you can offer. And I think you have an amazing product.
Well, and I think my take on it, for what it's worth, is, maybe there's a separate, but, connected like Booker app or something that is the venue's ability to basically swipe on talent they want, or, or a promoter's opportunity to do that. My concern with opening it up to let every musician be able to contact venues is that the venues then get bombarded by all these musicians, and many of them probably aren't at the level they need to be at or whatever. They're just young kids that want to play gigs. And so, but by, siloing that service altogether as something that you just sell to venues, as here's access to artists, it seems like, something like that might be a little bit more under control of the venue. And then you could have a suite of services that are specific to bookers and promoters. So
one of the things that I always often think about is like build the tool for a specific use case, but then kind of in some respects step outside of that use case and see how that tool might be useful for other people who are also in your community, and then make that version of it, because you're kind of giving the tool to the person and the people will decide how to use it. And I'll be much more specific than that now. We are launching a feature probably in 3 months called Marketplace. Marketplace is going to allow any two profile types on the app, whether it's a band, an individual, or a venue, to sell services, but in a secure way. And so that service might be mastering a song, but that service might also be playing a gig at your venue. And so it's up to the profile to create the service that they want to offer, and it's up to the person transacting with that profile to instigate purchase. We're doing it for a couple of reasons. I think it addresses some of what you guys have raised here. We're doing it because, number one, about 50% of people on Vampr talk transactional. So there'll be a dollar sign included in the conversation, which is alarming to us a little bit because we don't have any way to make sure that transaction happens safely. Number two, there have been cases of scammers on our platform. Surprise, surprise, a popular social media platform has bad actors. We do our best to stamp it out, but there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and legitimizing a process that's being exploited is one. And then number 3, it also opens a new revenue opportunity for the business too. So to take a small cut of a transaction. So yeah, we're bringing this marketplace thing to legitimize that process. It's already happening. People are just doing it on Venmo and PayPal. So why not actually offer that through the app itself? And that might actually make it more attractive for venue apps to start popping up more frequently and using it in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that payment processing is huge, right? I mean, not only is it, convenient for people, but it is another revenue stream. And, I think, in the spirit of all the other things that you're already doing, which are building this cohesive experience for, depending on your profile type, but, you've created this cohesive experience that's safe and inclusive and easy to use. If you didn't have to now jump out to a third party to make a payment, and you knew it was being processed, or maybe, like in a model or a model sort of like Upwork uses, which is they take money and they put it in escrow.
That's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah. So basically you get your guarantee from the venue. There's no, promoter walking out the back door before you finish your set or any of this kind of stuff going on.
No, that's exactly what we're going to be doing, because what a lot of the scammers were doing with things like, write me a song and I'll send you some money, and no money ever came, and all that kind of, this is one specific example, but that would happen a lot. So yeah, the escrow thing's a very attractive solution, I think, functionally for our users as well.
Yeah. Do you offer any merch solutions?
Not currently. I did get approached by a couple of those sorts of companies in the last month. Does make sense, obviously, to have that as a part of your profile. It's on my whiteboard right behind me that I don't know. There's merch somewhere on there. Yeah, it is something that we've thought about. From a priority perspective, it's not very high right now. Not because it couldn't make a huge impact. It's just, we've got boring things to think about, like internal tools and algorithms maturing and transitioning from one type of chat infrastructure to another. And so when you start adding in all those boring things, suddenly you get to December on the roadmap and you go, fuck.
Right.
You got to work in the fun, new, exciting things like Marketplace with, internal tools.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to actually download the app and try and play around with the feature set that you have. The Marketplace sounds amazing. Just that escrow option, the ability, because there's been times that I've taken shady gigs where I'm like, am I actually going to get paid? And when you work with like promoters, for example, if they don't get the doors, are you going to get paid that night? And you don't want to get that conversation at the end of the night. You want to have it where, you're going to walk away with your money that was talked upon. So. Yeah,
and also like think about like some other case, like sound guys who are the house guy that doesn't get paid or whatever. I can think of many times in my career I watched other people, not necessarily myself, but other people get screwed, and I think escrow does solve that a lot. But that's not out yet. But I think that's probably coming in July is the current estimate. So yeah, watch this space for that one. I still get screwed over on that kind of stuff to this day. I had a VC from China call me yesterday, wanted an hour of consultation, offered to pay me $400. I just didn't trust that I would get paid, so I hung up. It still happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it. Anytime there's somebody looking for an opportunity, there's bound to be something like that.
Yeah.
So I wonder, one of the talking points we have here is this idea of other tools or powerful tools that independent artists should be using. We've spent a lot of time talking about your platform specifically. Obviously, we think it's the most powerful tool. But, there's probably a little bit of, gray area between when you're really ready to start having the conversations that you can have on Vampr and not. And maybe even, what you're doing third party outside of Vampr, things like that. So I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of the state of the music business and how an artist can best capitalize, using either modern technology or powerful tools, maybe things that people don't know about.
So it's a great question. I think one of the things that, if you ever look through the review section on the App Store about our platform, you will see a lot of musicians with chips on their shoulder saying things like, my career hasn't gotten going yet and I've been on here for 3 months, or I didn't meet a celebrity, what's going on? And so we often come back to this idea of, and we try to educate on this, but it's tough. Education in music is tough. But we come back to this thing a lot called horizontal networking. And it's this idea of like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So invest in the people around you. Stop trying to star fuck and go to the people above you, because when you invest in the people around you, inevitably someone in the group gets an opportunity or steps up at some point, and typically speaking, they'll bring their squad with them. That is sort of a truism, or it's just something common to tribal industries like this. And so we encourage folks to really respect that and invest in that, because it's almost like a hack into guaranteeing that you'll have a career in the industry. Like, I've seen it. I worked at Good Music for a little bit, and it was shocking to me how many people at Good Music came from Chicago from the early days and was still in Kanye's crew. And, I've worked with, a couple of years ago, a guy called Tommy Brown, who's a very big producer, who's done all of Ariana Grande's records. And it was shocking to me how many people in his squad came from their hometown, and how him and Ariana knew each other when they were both non-celebrities. And so I always kind of use those examples as going, guys, they didn't get put in a room together by some, A&R person that you'll never get to meet. They invested in each other's energy in the foundational early days, and then they all rose together, and now they've got sustainable careers in music. So we always come back to this idea, and to that end, how do we help that technologically as well? We have started to get a little bit more intelligent with how we make suggestions to people. So there's certain indicators in a profile that allow us to know that this person's like a 10 and this person's a 1. So when someone first logs onto Vampr, they completed their information. Our algorithm sort of has a basic idea of where they sit in that landscape. We try to show the 1s to the 1s and the 10s to the 10s. It just creates a better community. And then we also have to create ways for people to upgrade through that ladder too, right? And there's other things that allow us to work that out as well. And it all happens, there's not one person sitting behind a computer logging all this. It all happens automatically now. But that's us playing hopefully a helping part in that role too, because typically speaking, a 1, and I don't mean it in a really derogatory way, but I get a very early stage musician that doesn't have a well-tuned ear, doesn't really know what a professional master should be or should sound like. They also can't hear that someone else is a 1, so they're comfortable being presented that, if that makes sense. Whereas a 10 can spot a 1, so you can only show other 10s to 10s. So yeah, look, it's something that we're working on multiple fronts, on communications fronts, encouraging people to understand this idea of investing in their level. And then, what I was just saying on the algorithm side.
Yeah, well, and I imagine you've got to do a little bit of tweaking also, just to, because I imagine everyone comes in thinking they're a 7 or an 8. And so, they might put like an Aerosmith or Rolling Stones at 10, and my little garage band is a 6.5. Yeah, but, so I imagine there's a little bloat you have to work through.
In the first version of Vampr, we had, and this never actually even shipped to the public. It was like, this is the testing version back in 2016, 6 years ago. Shit. We had a slider that allowed people to put their skill level. And of course, when we tested it with people, everyone put their skill level to semi-professional. And we could have predicted that, but we had to see it. And it's true. Everyone did do that. We gave people wireframe PDFs that they could sort of click on, and we could see where they were clicking, and everyone would click semi-professional. When of course, some of them were actually legit pros and some of them were just beginners. And so we got rid of that, and always knew that it was going to be kind of something that we had to do a bit Apple-like, where Apple kind of has a magic to their products where they're solving problems for people that they don't even realize that it's happening under the hood. And so we realized this is going to have to be one of those under the hood magical solutions. And I won't profess that we've got it perfect. We don't. I mean, sometimes when I've shown Vampr to top music execs, I sit there and cross my fingers sometimes, because depending on the day or what the algorithm spits out, sometimes they'll be presented with a 10, and that's incredible, as they should have. But then other times I've seen them be presented with real duds, and it's really disheartening. You've waited 6 months to get into the office of a senior vice president of Universal or whatever, and it doesn't perform. So,
yeah, but those guys need to understand this is an open market for everyone. And like you said, there's 1s and 10s. And if you think about it, even on a sound engineer side of things, right? There's 1s and 10s on that level as well. And so the 4.5 sound engineer needs to be playing with the 4.5 band so he can perfect his skill, his talent, and grow with them. And that, just like you said, rising tide, I think what you're doing, and the fact that you acknowledge that there's 1s and 10s and that they need to be paired together makes complete sense. And so I really like that.
Well, I think musical artists, like, so I spend my day in the design world, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. I think musical artists are very similar to creative, visual artists, which is that, the young, aspiring, new kid always overestimates their ability. And the, haggard, experienced, road-worn, version will always downplay their experience. So it's really a psychological thing. Like, I mean, it would be a real challenge to try and crack that nut in a very, I don't know, concrete way.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, but I'm pretty sure that anyone else who's ever tried to crack into this space, like startup or otherwise, hasn't factored that in. And I think that's maybe been why no one's gotten quite to where we've taken it to and where we're hoping to take it, further.
Yeah, I suspect your insights too as an artist probably have a lot to do with that, versus just a tech team with an idea.
For sure. I think we underestimated our domain experience when we started, and we only learned that out. We found that out when we started investigating going into film and TV and creative artists, and we started to expand beyond musicians. We're like, oh, we don't know shit about these other fields. And then became very obvious just how valuable our own domain expertise was. Like, I don't know how much money we saved. But yeah.
So when you realized that, did you roll that back and just stick with music, or is that still, are you going after the photographers and the film and those kind of people as well?
That's a great question. So we had a lot of workshops about it, and where we ultimately decided to let it go would be market driven. So there are those film and TV categories, but the app is sort of haute couture for musicians. What I think you will see in the next 12 months is a slightly different onboarding experience where we'll ask you things right up front, like, are you a musician, or are you a fan, or are you another sort of type of creative? And we'll customize the onboarding flow based on your professional status. But it's still going to be market driven. So yeah, what we did, we walked back from because we nearly went down the route of letting people put in their favorite movies and their favorite video games. And maybe we will still do that, but not as a priority.
Love it.
Yeah. No, another thing that, it just occurred to me when you were saying that, or you mentioned the idea of a fan, what a fan's experience might be with this. And I could see for a person like me, who's a big music fan, and one of my favorite things is new music discovery. And so it seems like, even if I'm not looking to hire these people, but maybe I want to go to their show or, whatever.
10% of our user base is fans. What typically happens with music platforms that explode is it starts with professionals, and once you get the mass adoption with the professionals, the fan typically follows. And so you see that with Beatport, you see that with SoundCloud, even MySpace, right? It attracted a lot of musicians first, and then it was a social network more broadly, but that was a big driver for adoption. So I don't think Vampr is going to be any exception, assuming that we keep growing at the rate we're growing. I think you will see that fan slice of the community increase. We do know of the fans that come, they're just there to swipe on bands in the neighborhood or bands that exist because we like similar music. So it is a powerful tool for music discovery. We don't market it like that. I don't think we should yet. I think it would be premature, frankly, but it's great that people are using it that way. Yeah. I don't really honestly give a crap how people use Vampr. It's a tool that's there to be used for whatever it is you're trying to get out of it. That's
Well, and what occurs to me is, opportunities to co-brand Vampr with, companies like Spotify or Pandora or whatever, and you can get your Vampr channel that's sort of fed by the top bands in Vampr or whatever. And, it seems like there could be some sort of collaborative opportunities around that platform too, that, might be more fan-centric experience, as your catalog of artists continue to grow and, you start to be, sort of known as the place to go find new music or aspiring talent. I think, there's enough people that are always looking for what's next that, that seems like a really interesting place to play.
We are looking at creating emerging charts, because we get earlier information on artists than basically any platform on the planet. Maybe SoundCloud is the exception to that. And I see actually an announcement yesterday that they're doubling down on their efforts to identify talent too. And so I wouldn't say that has us worried, but we're going to potentially do some work on that.
I have a lot to say about SoundCloud, and none of it's good lately.
So, maybe take that one offline, but I agree. I don't have a lot of kind things to say about that business. I think that, and I'll happily put this part on record, but look, we have them embedded in our platform. We're one of their legacy developer partnerships, but they're so developer unfriendly in the same way that they've been so artist unfriendly, and greedy in many respects, and not quick to change business models when certain ones haven't worked. And so I don't like their team. I also know that the team's changed many times over the years, right? So part of the reason I think SoundCloud's a little bit slow and inefficient is because there's a bit of bloat at the company. They're in that weird position where they've probably raised a little bit too much money. And what happens when you raise too much money is things become less efficient, and lots of leadership squabbles. And so I don't know that to be true. I just know it is true.
I suspect, with change of crew, you get change of leadership and change of opinions or perspectives. And, what could start out as maybe, I don't know enough about their background to say, but, maybe early in the development, the CEO was very music centric, and maybe this guy, whoever's in charge today is, more financially driven or something. And so there's a disparity. You can even look at companies like Apple, right? The innovation that happened under a Steve Jobs versus the efficiencies that's been created by Tim Cook. It's maybe not as, I guess, world changing as some of the things that occurred under Steve Jobs. But the business has grown like exponentially under his tutelage. So it's like, they're both good but different, right? Yeah. And so maybe in this situation, it's something like that.
Something like that.
The one thing that I will mention, because it bugs me to the point where I want to say it, their embedded audio player, when they try to drive traffic from my website that I've embedded my audio that I'm trying to promote, and they're trying to drive it to SoundCloud, that right there is enough for me to start shopping for another thing. Like the ability to embed an audio file onto the popover that's trying to say go to SoundCloud is enough for me to not use them anymore.
Yeah.
So
look, it all comes back down to this same API thing, which is how they ultimately stream music from their servers through CDNs, whether it's through their embedded widget, which I agree. We have the same thing on Vampr, right? We have our SoundCloud player, which is fairly customized at this point. And we do a couple of things to get around some of the stuff that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, even that's technically breaking some rules, but we are bringing them. I mean, of course, they've got probably 1 million or 2 million daily active users. I don't quite know, but I guess that's about right. But we're bringing them a percentage of that, maybe 1 or 2% of that. And we are almost punished for it frequently. I mean, their integration with Vampr breaks less than it used to. It used to be a weekly thing. Now it's probably every couple of months. But when it happens, the user experience for our users is affected too. And we're driving them traffic. So, we're not in love with it. A lot of people ask us, why haven't we allowed upload natively to Vampr?
Well, you'd be fighting the same problems that SoundCloud is fighting.
Exactly.
And it's the people sharing music that's not theirs, and you got copyright issues. And going down that road is not worth it.
We're not prepared in that side of things, no.
Yeah. And so that's what's hard about hosting audio is like, because I've thought about it. I had a domain called mp3pool.com. Like MP3 pool. And I was I actually let it lapse because I decided I just didn't want to deal with that thing. And so I got rid of it. But I mean, like just that hurdle, that obstacle of getting around copyright rules is enough not to make it worth it. And why you actually are working with SoundCloud and jumping through their hurdles because you have to. So I totally get it.
If Vampr, as I said before, keeps going on its current trajectory and we sort of hit some important investment goals and do some larger rounds, one day there might be a point where it actually makes sense to spend the money to do that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, Josh,
hey,
the end here. I wonder if we could talk just quickly, maybe in the last couple of minutes. We've sort of touched on a bunch of key features and things like that, but I wonder if you could just give us sort of a snapshot of what's to come for Vampr, what you sort of see as the big next thing, or what the dream looks like for the next step.
Yeah.
And then we can just kind of get into a little bit of where people can track you down and that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, I think we've kind of covered the next step a little bit when we talked about Marketplace. That's kind of our marquee release for the year. And so that's, as I say, it's a couple months away, hopefully. So everyone definitely look out for that. But in the meantime, obviously, Vampr exists today as an incredibly large and vibrant, active community of people basically looking for opportunity. And I assume anyone listening to this is probably in that boat. So definitely check out the platform, download it on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Get swiping and connecting. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So, and for people who don't know, or if it maybe wasn't obvious, the spelling is VAMPR. So it's vampr.com, just no E in there or anything. So, anyone used to sort of web parlance these days could probably put it together. But anyway, I just want clarity around that. And then, just vampr.com, anywhere else they ought to track you down, or if people wanted to maybe speak to you or talk about investment opportunities, things like that. Are you open to that kind of conversation?
Sure. About the only social media that I do outside of Vampr is LinkedIn. So they can find me, Josh Simons. I should come up first, I imagine. And they can connect with me there. I do generally get back to everyone. Maybe not immediately, but it does happen. So by all means, hit me up. Love to get anyone's feedback listening.
Awesome.
Love it.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been an awesome conversation. Me and Mike always like to geek out on the music shows, so it's a lot of fun to have these conversations. So thanks so much for doing that.
No worries, guys. My pleasure.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week, and we'll see you all next time.